and I am honored to invite for her fifth-year sermon, Jaclyn Cohen.
The Hasidic masters tell the story of the great Rebbe Zusia. When Rebbe Zusia was on his deathbed, he was upset, he was crying, and tears were streaming down his face. His students asked with great concern, "Rebbe Zusia, why are you upset? Why are you crying? Are you afraid that when you die, you will be asked, why were you not more like Moses?" "No," he responded. "In the world to come, they will not ask me, why were you not more like Moses? They will ask me, why were you not more like Zusia?" The first time I heard that story was from the lips of Rabbi Steve Leder, who, believe it or not, back in the day was our class's homiletics teacher. It was second year, fall semester. So what prompted the story? Well, Rabbi Leder happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, catching me in one of my, I can't believe I'm in rabbinical school, this is totally insane, what was I thinking moments. Those of you who were there were quite a few that semester. He took me on a walk and listened as I went on and on and on about my insecurities and fears. Back then, I was in a really narrow place. My own personal needs Ryan, both here at school and at home. My mentor from the Rabbinic Ed year, Sarah Lee, used to talk about the imposter syndrome, which is a perplexing and very real psychological phenomenon where people are physically unable to internalize their accomplishments. So back then I had it big time, and I didn't even need my therapist to diagnose it for me, because I had baggage coming in here. We all do, because we're human. I was so nervous that my baggage was going to spill out all over the hallways of HUC and expose me for not being smart enough, for not being disciplined enough, for not being learned enough in the right subjects. I was scared that my classmates and teachers were going to judge me because I first applied to HUC's cantorial program, but I was rejected. I worried that they would think that I had somehow rigged the system and that I did not deserve to be here. I was also anxious, knowing that semester I would go from engaged to single, that I would soon call off a wedding to my college boyfriend. I was terrified of what people would think and what they would say. The irony, one I think that many of us here can relate to, is that back then I spent so much time looking outward, worrying about what everyone around me was thinking and doing and feeling. The story of Zusia should have been a wake-up call to start letting go of all that and start listening to my voice. But that, my friends and classmates, meant stepping into a morass of vulnerability and exposure, and meant pulling into the fast lane of truth and honesty and realness. And that sounded awful. It sounded like weakness and defeat and failure. I didn't want it, so I pushed it away. I put on my armor, and I tried to deflect and avoid. But ultimately, I gave in. Vulnerability is something I've been thinking a lot about recently. It's certainly on my mind at the beginning of this very strange and surreal fifth year, a time of sharing my truth with classmates and prospective employers. It feels like every day we get yet another reminder to polish and prepare the windows onto our impending rabbinate. Personal statements, resumes, goals and objectives for the career we hope to have. There was no exception. We had our first meeting about placement. It's definitely exciting, don't get me wrong. It's also really daunting. And not in a long time have I felt quite so exposed. Luckily, we Jewish professionals have plenty of resources at our fingertips. And wouldn't you know it, Embedded in Vayera this week is a powerful example of vulnerability and exposure. Now, I've spent many hours of my life wrestling with the Akedah, but it wasn't until this time around that I turned my focus towards Isaac. This time I kept my eyes on Isaac as father and son ascended Mount Moriah. And I couldn't help but feel the pain and the shock and the betrayal of the son putting his faith and trust in the father. The shame of being led up a mountain only to be placed on an altar. Exposure of the boy splayed out atop the wood, a knife hovering above, held by the parent. In this episode, we witness Isaac in a moment of excruciating vulnerability. And then we don't hear a thing from him or about him until after Sarah has died and Abraham has turned his focus toward finding him a wife. I wonder if Isaac's shame, his embarrassment, kept him silent. I mean, think about it. What would Isaac have said the Monday after the incident at the well? What would he have said to his buddies? Hey guys, what's up? Oh, this weekend almost got sacrificed to my dad. No big deal. How was yours? No. Isaac's silence, at least in my mind in this reading, conveys a deep fear over being exposed. Shame in admitting that maybe his father didn't really love him. A fear that his mother turned away just as she saw them leave that morning. A humiliation that maybe Ishmael was truly the rightful heir as the firstborn son. Shame is present in this story. Exposure is present in this story. Even the first word Dina chanted, Vayera, the title and theme of this parsha, means to be seen, to appear, to be revealed. Now, to his credit, Isaac pushes through that shame into the rest of his life. He creates a family with Rebekah. He continues the lineage of his father despite the serious emotional scarring. I wonder, what can we learn from his example? Recently, I've gotten acquainted with Dr. Brene Brown, who is a researcher/storyteller based in Houston. You may recognize her name if you're an Oprah person like me, or maybe you saw her TED Talk from 2010 on vulnerability and shame. Dr. Brown's research was primarily in the field of connectedness, how we humans make sense of and navigate the world around us. In breaking down the hows and whys of connection, she discovered its two biggest roadblocks: shame and fear. I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. And underpinning that is excruciating vulnerability. People who believe they are worthy of connection and love and belonging, she calls them the wholehearted. They're not afraid to be vulnerable. They believe it is necessary and that it makes them beautiful. She believes that it is the birthplace of creativity and joy and gratitude. One of the most powerful messages in her talk is this: in order to have connection, we must truly be seen. We must have the courage and the compassion to tell the story of who we are with our whole heart. Dr. Brown proposes that to connect, to experience lives that are rich and meaningful, we should not numb our true emotions or pretend that we are perfect. It doesn't work. Instead, we must be unafraid, be authentic, and real. We must let ourselves be seen, love with whole hearts, practice gratitude and joy, and most importantly, trust that we are enough. This past week, inspired by Dr. Brown, I sent an email to some friends and family asking me to share a moment in their lives when they were most vulnerable. And at first, no one responded. No one. And I thought that I was simply going to drosh on the fact that they were silent. But then slowly, I started hearing back. I heard from people who I love and care about, who I see as brave, bold. They wrote me. I felt vulnerable when I was not in control, when I did not know a single soul. When the doctor told me, a first-year resident, that all emergency calls were being routed to me. When I told the observant girl that I'm dating about my struggles with religion. When I told my parents I was gay and in love with another man. When I said, I love you and I want to spend my life with you, before my partner ever did. The list goes on, and I'm still getting responses. So, what will your contribution be? Each of us, no matter our age, race, sexual orientation, or history, struggles to some degree with being vulnerable, with a fear of being really, truly seen. But as Brene Brown and Isaac and some brave souls in my circle have taught me, embracing, owning, coming to terms with, and leaning into that vulnerable part of ourselves, it ultimately pushes us to become our most authentic, to live with hearts that are whole, full, and connected. Like many of my classmates, I don't know where I will be 1 year from now. That uncertainty sparks a deep and real and sometimes painful feeling that I may be headed for disappointment and letdown. 5 years ago, I probably would have tried to push it away, bottle it up, or take it into my therapist's office and leave it there. But today I'm standing on this bema, preaching one last time to this community, telling my story, and inviting each of you to tell yours. Through honesty and determination and boldness, we become the Jewish professionals and the people that we are meant to be. By listening to, appreciating, and honoring our insecurities and fears, we become stronger. We become better. By trusting that our intentions are good and noble, opening our hearts and letting others see into our souls, we rise. We grow, and in turn, so do those we serve. We have some extraordinary paths ahead of us. No doubt they will be challenging, demanding, fulfilling, rewarding. They begin with hearts that are open. They begin with words of truth and authenticity. Then, and only then, we will realize that we have the power to be more like Zizia, to be brave and bold and compassionate, to be who we are, to be enough, and to make our impact. So I'm Tony.